Okay, I think we're ready. And so now this evening, we're going to take a look at chapter 13, okay? Chapter 13, which begins on page 283 of your book. And again, we're going to look at the three sections: comunicación, ways of speaking, idiomatic ways of speaking that they want us to be aware of, the vocabulary related to the unit, and then estructura or grammar. So the unit deals with la naturaleza y el medio ambiente, nature and the environment. Okay, so let's take a look and see what they want us to know. So we can move on now to comunicación. What idiomatic things, ways of speaking do they want us to be aware of here? So we want to know how to talk about things that you think someone should do. You should do this, or you should do that, or you should consider this. Why? Because we're dealing with the environment, right? And so we know there's environmental problems. We're concerned about them. So there's things we would like to see people do, things we think they should do. And so that's what the idea is here. So let's go. You can, again, look through the little pre-exercise, but I prefer in this case, because you have time to go into this on your own, let's go and see exactly what do they want us to be able to say. And so let's look at the little box here at the page, top of page 385. And it says to talk about what you think you or someone else should do or should not do, use a form of debería. It's from the verb deber. Deber means to should or must. Deber, it's an ER verb, could also mean to owe. And you can use debería, okay, with the verb infinitive. So whatever you think somebody should do, just follow it with the infinitive of that verb. You know, you should sing. Usted debería cantar. You should recycle. Usted debería reciclar. Okay. Etc. You should, I don't know, save energy. Usted debería ahorrar energía. Ahorrar is the verb to save. I'm trying to use some of the verbs in language that are tied into this unit, which deals with conservation and the environment. Let's take a look here. So debería, and that's the usted el ella form. If you're going to use the usted form, you would say usted debería, but you might want to use the informal tú form, tú deberías. Okay. Let's look at the second one here. Deberíamos reciclar. We can use the we form. We should recycle. Deberíamos reciclar. You could give somebody a negative injunction. Tú no deberías contaminar. Contaminar means to contaminate, but better, it means to pollute. So you should not pollute. No deberías contaminar. And then you can use the plural you form. You all should cuidar el planeta. You should take care of, cuidar the planet. Notice planeta ends in an A, but it is masculine, word of Greek origin. Now, here's a little question here again. Go through this on your own. This will be on your exam. It's very simple. Just get familiar with it, and particularly with some of the vocabulary and verbs associated with the environment. So they just have some examples. Deberíamos ahorrar agua. Ahorrar, I used it earlier, is to save. Deberíamos evitar, we should avoid el uso excesivo de electricidad, okay? Deberíamos hacer abono. We should make fertilizer con los desechos orgánicos, with organic desechos are like scraps, like composting. Okay, deberíamos proteger. We should protect. And look at this. Look at some of those examples. All right. What's the next thing they want us to know in terms of comunicación? These are idiomatic ways of speaking, and some of these you should already be familiar with. Expressing how long you've been doing something. Like, I've been recycling for 14 years. How would you ask somebody, how long have you been recycling? How would you answer it? And you use this, these are a couple expressions you can use. You can use, let's go right to the box here. Go to the box here on page 386. And ¿cuánto tiempo llevas? And then you use the present participle, the ing form, or whatever the verb is. So, ¿cuánto tiempo? How long? Llevas literally means to carry. How long have you been carrying? And then you use your verb, whatever it is. How long have you been carrying, let's say, recycling? So you would take, you want to ask ultimately is how long have you been recycling? They would use cuánto tiempo llevas, and then take whatever verb it is, whether it's walking, recycling, singing, get the present participle form of it, okay? If it's an AR verb, it'll be stem and ando. If it's an ERIR verb, it'll be stem and iendo. So, how long have you been recycling? ¿Cuánto tiempo llevas reciclando? How long have you, literally, how long have you been carrying recycling? Okay. All right. Or you can use this phrase, which is maybe used a little bit more. ¿Cuánto tiempo hace que reciclas? Then just give me the verb in the present tense. Literally, how much time does it make that you recycle? ¿Hace cuánto tiempo hace que reciclas? How long have you been recycling? So they both ask the same thing. One is with llevar, and then the present participle of the verb. ¿Cuánto tiempo llevas reciclando? The other one is ¿cuánto tiempo hace que reciclas? Just use the present tense of the verb. And here they give it to you below. All right. And they give you some more examples. I would ask you just to look through this. You're going to have a couple questions on the exam on that. Very simple, and in your homework as well. Okay, now let's move to the vocabulary, okay? And the vocabulary starts on page 388. And again, some of these terms you may already know in Spanish. A lot of the terms dealing with the environment, since they have to do with science, are Latin-based, and many of them you can identify already because they're cognates with English, but not all of them. But let's look at them. So the environment is medio ambiente. Medio ambiente is the environment. And again, go through this on your own, but let's take a look at some of the vocabulary, because on your test and on your homework, you're going to be either listening to or reading passages that have to do with the environment or ecology. So I want you to be comfortable with the language so that you can readily answer any questions that may come up. So let's take a look. It says, hay varias causas de la deforestación. Well, there are many, or there are several, varias causas, causes of what? Deforestación, deforestation. Okay. El descuido, the not taking care of, de una persona, okay. The carelessness de una persona con un cigarrillo. So if a person is careless with a cigarette, puede causar la quema, the burning. Quemar is to burn. de bosques. Bosques are forests. So the word for forest is el bosque. So you could cause the quema, the burning of a bosque or a forest fire. Okay, a cattle is la ganaderia, ganaderia, and you know that they've cut down, for example, in the tropics, particularly in Brazil, a lot of jungle, all right, tropical jungle, to put in cattle ranches. So this también, this also is not good for the environment. La tala de árboles. Tala means the cutting, the cutting. La tala de árboles, cutting of trees. All right. Destruir means what? To destroy. Al destruir tantos árboles, when we destroy or upon destroying so many trees, la cadena alimenticia, that's the food chain, sufre, okay? The food chain suffers if you cut away all the vegetation that supports all of the living organisms in an area. You're going to hurt the environment. El daño, the injury or danger a los árboles puede causar un efecto, can cause an effect sobre todo tipo de flora, or on all types of flora or plants and animals, fauna. And it says la extinción, it can lead to what? The extinction, la extinción de las especies. Especies are species. Okay, so I just wanted to get you familiar with some of that language. Look through this. Planet Earth, planeta Tierra, está en peligro. It's in danger. Peligro means danger. La contaminación means pollution del aire, of the air. The atmosphere, la atmósfera, can lead to what? What's one of the biggest concerns now of our elites and of mankind right now is el calentamiento global, global warming. And indeed, some countries are actually trying to halt the growth of industrialization, particularly in the more developed countries. Germany, for example, now is cutting back. When it was one of the industrial powerhouses of the world, but their elites and many that are very influential in government are concerned about global warming, want to control and even decelerate industrialization. So that's happening, for example, in Germany and in many places in the West, even in this country, because of what? Concern for calentamiento global. And this will affect all of us down the road in terms of how we live and you know, exactly what kind of cars we drive, if we drive any at all, as we try to pull back from our old industrial model of development. Okay. Anyway, take a look through this section. Ecológicos would be ecological. La sequía is a drought. Okay. Many of you are aware there's been a lot of drought due to global warming. Sequía is a drought. Tormentas are storms. Some say storms have been intensifying with global warming. So tornadoes now are more intense, or hurricanes are more intense. A storm in Spanish is una tormenta. And there's a word for hurricane, huracán. Okay, again, more vocabulary about the environment. Again, this has become very important. World leadership, particularly in the West, is very concerned about global warming and is taking methods to hopefully halt it. There are a lot of people are activistas, are politically active in this cause. They want to proteger el medio ambiente. They want to protect the environment. They want to prohibir la contaminación. They want to prohibit what? La contaminación, pollution, and salvar and save animals. We want to conserve plants, right? Conservar las plantas. So take a look at this. And a lot of people now are participando, they're participating in the environmental movement. Okay, and so you will have some readings on the environmental movement, things that people are doing, and I just want you to feel comfortable with this language. Salvaje, what does that mean? Wild. So what's a wild animal? Un animal salvaje. Okay, disminución is what it looks like, the diminution, the lessening. Uh, um, okay, recursos are resources, natural resources are recursos naturales. To exploit the environment is explotar. Okay, to use up, agotamiento. Okay, we're using up our bosques, right? We've been cutting down, particularly in Brazil. There's been an agotamiento de los bosques y las selvas. And then there's a section here on some animals that are on the verge of extinction. So take a look at this and get familiar with the vocabulary, because on your homework and particularly on your exam, you're going to have passages to listen to and read using a lot of this vocabulary. Okay, let's take a look here. We're just grabbing at random here in F on page 391, el medio ambiente en las noticias, the environment in the news. Las noticias is news. So what are we hearing about on the news in regards to the environment? Well, huracanes amenacen. There's the word menace in there. Hurricanes menace or threaten la costa, are threatening the coast. La tala masiva de árboles. What does tala mean? The cutting, the massive cutting of trees. Okay. And las selvas. A selva is a jungle, in the jungles. Let me see. What else? Nueva ley protege la naturaleza. A new law protects nature. La naturaleza is nature. And so just look through look through these sections and just get comfortable with the vocabulary. And now we can jump to section 3, estructura. Okay. And estructura starts on page 392. And what do we want to see here? Okay. Well, what are we going to look at? We're going to look at the subjunctive case, okay? So you should know how to form the subjunctive. We've already looked at it. The present subjunctive, how do we form it? Well, if we have an AR verb, we're going to have E endings, if everybody remembers, okay? And if we have an ER or IR verb, we're going to have A endings, okay? So if I want to use hablar in the subjunctive and conjugate it, it would be que yo hable, not an A ending, but an E, hable, que tú hables, yes, que él hable, que nosotros hablemos, que ellos hablen. Everybody remember that? And likewise, when we go to use the subjunctive with an ER verb like comer, we're not going to have E endings, but A endings, que yo coma, que tú comas, AS ending, que él coma, A ending, que comamos, and que ellos coman. So make sure you're clear on the formation of the subjunctive. And normally, when did we learn to use a subjunctive? We'll have a first clause, a statement, and then a secondary clause. So in the first clause, if we use certain verbs or state certain things, we'll put the verb in the second clause, the dependent clause, in the subjunctive form, and normally with verbs of volition, of wanting, desiring, recommending. So I recommend you speak Spanish. Yo recomiendo, first clause, que tú hables español. Everybody remember that? I want you to speak Spanish. Yo quiero que tú hables español. O que tú comas. más comida. All right. So in your second clause, those verbs will trigger the subjunctives, and they're usually verbs of volition, recommendation. All right. Let's move on. What is this unit about? Well, in this case, all they want us to learn here, and let me slip back. Give me a second. We want to use the subjunctive with irregular verbs. All right. And here they are. Right. Here are your verbs at the top of page 393. Please get familiar with these. And these many of you should already know, but just as a refresher, these are your irregular yo verbs. You're irregular. When we learned them in the present tense, they were totally regular except for the yo form. You should know these. We use them all the time. Hacer, poner, salir, tener, traer. All right. And the yo form is completely out of left field. You just must learn it. So the yo form you must learn. So these are not stem and ending verbs. It's when it comes to yo, you just learn it. So what is the stem here? It's yo hago, yo pongo, yo salgo, yo tengo, yo vengo, yo traigo, I bring, right? So when you have irregular yo verb, okay, that's irregular in the present tense, how do you form the subjunctive? You drop the O, and then you add on the subjunctive endings. So if it's an ER verb or an IR verb, it's going to have A endings, right? So I want you to do something would be yo quiero que, in the second in the second clause, I'm going to say yo quiero que tú, I want you to do something. Yo quiero que tú hagas. Where did hagas come from? From the yo present form, I drop the O and I put on an AS ending, the subjunctive ending for tú. Okay? Yo quiero que él haga. Yo quiero que nosotros hagamos. Yo quiero que tú tengas. Okay? Yo recomiendo que él tenga. I want you to bring. Yo quiero que tú traigas. Where does traigas come from? Traigo, I drop the O and I put an AS ending with tú. So take a look at these verbs. Here they are, hacer, poner, salir, tener, and traer. And again, they basically tell you the same thing I did. You can read through here, but they are your irregular yo verbs. Drop the O from them and put on your present tense subjunctive endings. Here they give you a little bit as to why the irregular yo verbs developed the way they did, why that yo present tense ended up with a G in it. I mean, you can take a look at that if you have any interest in linguistics and the evolution of languages. And let's move on. And let me see. What are the other irregular verbs in Spanish? They are not all irregular verbs. The verb to go, ir, and the verb to be, ser, are totally irregular. And the form is vaya, okay, vaya. So yo quiero que él vaya, yo quiero que tú vayas, él quiere que yo vaya, él quiere que nosotros vayamos. Okay, that is your form. And ser is going to be sea. Yo quiero que tú seas. Yo quiero que él sea. Ellos quieren que nosotros seamos. Ellos, they want us to be. Ellos quieren que nosotros seamos. So there's your root there is sea. All right, you put on your subjunctive endings. Let's move on. You can look through some of these exercises. And finally, let's move on. So those were our irregular subjunctive forms. Now, we're in the second section of Estructura in 13.2. And again, you will be tested on this. use the subjunctive when there's disbelief or any uncertainty expressed. So you'll have your first clause, I doubt, I don't believe. Then you'll have your second clause. If there's doubt or disbelief in the first clause, the second clause will be in the subjunctive. That's all. So let's move on and look at the actividades analíticas. Okay. So we are here on page, give me a second, 395. Okay. And just to review again, let's look at number 1 here. It says, as you saw in chapter 12, you use a subjunctive with expressions of volition. I want you to do something, a recommendation. Certain verbs and expressions require the verb that follows to be in the subjunctive form. Based on what you saw above, indicate which of the following expressions require the subjunctive. Okay. So when there's doubt, you're going to want to use the subjunctive in the second clause. So if the first, so you're going to use the subjunctive after this, no creer que. Creer means to believe. If you don't believe something, you doubt it. So yo no creo que tú comas mucho. I don't believe you eat a lot. Notice que tú comas. I use the subjunctive with no creer because there's doubt. Everybody got that? Here, I would use the present tense. If I believe something, there is no doubt. Yo creo que tú comes mucho. But with no creer, I'll use the subjunctive. Yo no creo que tú comas mucho. Okay, what about es posible que? If you say something's possible, you're expressing doubt. So you're going to use what? The subjunctive. Es posible que tú comas mucho. It's possible you do. I'm expressing doubt, so I have to use the subjunctive. All right. So what about this one? I think, I believe, or I think that you eat a lot. Yo pienso que tú comes mucho. If I believe it, there's no doubt. But what if I don't believe it? There's doubt, so I use the subjunctive. Yo no pienso que tú comas. And that's kind of how this works. So let's look at 2. What do the expressions that you selected in 1 all have in common? Okay. It's the second one here. They all express the idea that what follows may not be true. They show doubt. There are many more expressions that indicate uncertainty or doubt in Spanish. No es obvio que. It's not obvious that tú comas mucho. Es improbable que tú comas mucho. Again, I'm showing doubt. So in the second clause, I have to use the subjunctive. If I'm clear, yo creo, or yo pienso, then I use the present tense. I would never use the subjunctive. I'm unclear on it. Similarly, expressions such as es imposible que, no es cierto que, no es verdad que. So it is impossible that, it is not true that, or it is not certain that, it is not true that. I'm showing doubt. So I will always use the subjunctive after it. Let's take a look. No es cierto que puedas ver. It's not true that you can see. Antonio piensa. Look at this one. But watch this one. Antonio piensa. He believes. There's no doubt there, so we have to use the present tense. Antonio piensa que no es verdad. Okay, and then now, this is a little crazy, but it is not true. Que no es verdad. Now, the second clause is, I don't know why they gave an involved one like this with 3 clauses. You're not going to get 3 clauses on your exam, but let's follow it anyway. In Antonio piensa, first clause, there's no doubt. So there is regular present tense, no es verdad. But now, no es verdad means that it's not true. Now we have doubt. Que seas, that you're a student. So now instead of saying que tú eres, we're going to use seas because there was doubt expressed. In any event, Es cierto que shows that you're certain, so you'll always use the present tense after it. Es verdad que, you'll always use the present tense. It is true that you're certain. Es obvio que will always be followed by the present tense, never the subjunctive, because you are clear on this. There's no doubt. Es cierto que eres muy buen estudiante. Okay. Let us move on here. Let's see. So take a look at some of these questions here. Okay. Okay. And go through and try some of these exercises. So in this one, let's take a look at this particular exercise. It's on page 396 real quickly. It's B, el oso hormiguero. This is the anteater. They call it the ant bear, but it's an anteater for us. And so they want you to say, which one of these, es cierto que or no es cierto que, is the correct first clause, which would be the beginning clause, and then this, if this is the secondary clause. So let's look at the secondary clause. We've got come hormigas y termitas. So we've got the verb comer. Come is the present tense. Okay, eats ants and termites. So is it es cierto que come or no es cierto que? So what's true about the anteater? Is it going to be no es cierto que or es cierto que? Well, the verb in the second clause is in the present tense, so it must mean there's absolute certainty. So the introductory clause here is this one. Es cierto que come hormigas y termitas. It is true that it eats ants and termites. Es cierto que would be the correct answer. Again, I'm looking at that verb. Let's look at the next one. Tiene una lengua muy larga. Has a long tongue. So it is true that it has a long tongue, or it is not true that it has a long tongue. Well, this secondary clause, the verb tener, is in the present tense. It's not tenga, it's not the subjunctive. So it's got to be es cierto que. That's the introductory clause, is certain that. Okay, es cierto que. We always use the present tense after es cierto que because there's no doubt. Okay, it could not be no es cierto que because that implies doubt, which would mean the verb would have to be in what? In the subjunctive, and tiene is the present tense. It's not the subjunctive. Let's look at 3. Sea un tipo de oso is a type of bear. Okay, so we've got now sea. So it is the subjunctive. So that must mean the introductory clause is showing doubt. So no es cierto que sea un tipo de oso. So make sure you can go through there and answer these. Very simple. Okay. Okay. Again, here's some with creo and no creo. Again, if your first clause is creo que or él cree que, if it's positive, if it's an affirmative statement with the verb creer, I believe, he believes, we believe, the secondary clause will always be in the present tense. You will never use the subjunctive after creer que. But what about no creer que? Now you're showing doubt. So your secondary clause will always be in the subjunctive. You're showing doubt. Yo no creo que tú seas estudiante. I don't believe you're a student. Okay? Creo que tú eres estudiante. I believe you're a student. I use the present. So take a look at that. It's very simple. Go through some of these exercises. All right? All right? Es cierto que, present tense. No es cierto que, subjunctive. Es posible que shows doubt, be followed by the subjunctive. You'll have a few of these, of course, on your homework. and on your exams. These are the penguin rookeries, where the uh, penguins, male and female, they dig a small hole in the ground, and then they incubate their eggs there. I saw this in Patagonia in the south of Argentina. These are fairly small penguins, and this would be called a pinguinera, like a penguin rookery, La Pinguinera. And there's thousands of penguins, and you can visit these in the south of Argentina, well to the south. Uh, these are very distinct penguins from the ones on Antarctica. They're much larger birds. Those I never saw. I never made it to Antarctica. Okay. And then let's move on. Okay. Let's see. Okay. And now finally, let's go to the last section here on page 399 of Estructura. Okay. It's called the subjunctive, purpose, and contingency. So this is another case where you're going to use a subjunctive. It's very easy. Just get yourself used to it. They do some examples at the beginning, but let's go directly to the actividades analíticas, where they'll explain to us when do we use a subjunctive to show purpose or contingency. Okay, so you will always use the subjunctive after the phrase para qué. Para qué means in order that. So you'll have a clause like I speak Spanish para qué, so that you understand. Okay, para qué, in order that you understand. Yo hablo español para que tú entiendas. So after para qué, I'm going to conjugate my verb always in the subjunctive. So here's one. Voy a hablar muy despacio. I'm going to speak slowly para que tú me entiendas, so that you understand me. Look, it's entiendas, not entiendes. It's entiendas. Why? For whatever reason, para que always triggers, okay, the subjunctive. And I want you to be aware of that. And there's a little note here. Remember that the verb querer always triggers the use of the subjunctive. We want him to go. Queremos que él vaya. We want him to eat. Queremos que él coma más. We want him to eat more. Whenever we have the verb querer, in the second clause, the verb is always in the subjunctive, because when you have a verb of volition, of desire, use a subjunctive. Well, let's look what they say here. In this example with para que above, you speak slowly because you want the other person to understand you, as we just said. The meaning para que is thus similar to querer. So para que kind of implies, it means in order that. Both express that you want the thing to happen. So I'm going to speak slowly, voy a hablar muy despacio, para que, in order that you understand me, because I want you to understand me. There's a sense of volition there, and they're saying that's why para que always triggers the subjunctive, okay? We speak slowly because we want him to understand. And so nosotros hablamos despacio porque queremos que él entienda, o para que él entienda. When else do we use the subjunctive? We use it after this phrase, in case, in case. So it's a contingency. In case it rains, in case you don't pass the exam. I don't know, in case you can't find the store. It's a contingency. En caso de que. You will always use in caso de que when a clause is introduced by this with the subjunctive. And let's look. En caso de que llueva, in case that it rains tomorrow, call me, llámame. En caso de que no encuentres, subjunctive, in case you don't encounter or find the park, look for it on the map. En caso de que expresses what might happen, when it is not at all certain that it will. So it's showing uncertainty. Uncertainty triggers the subjunctive. Its meaning is similar to expressions like es posible que. Okay. So here's an example. Es posible que llueva. Again, I use the subjunctive after phrases of uncertainty. And en caso de que always triggers the subjunctive because it means uncertainty. What about por qué? You know, por qué? No, you never use por qué means because. Because. Why did you go to the house? Because I needed to, or because I had to eat. That doesn't show any uncertainty. So just be careful on your homework questions on your test. Para qué triggers the subjunctive. Por qué does not. It doesn't need it. There's no uncertainty. Let's take a look. Voy a hablar muy despacio. I'm going to speak slowly. Porque a veces no me entiendes. Because sometimes you don't understand me. There's no uncertainty there. Llámame. Porque va a llover mañana. Call me because it's going to rain tomorrow. So very simple, very straightforward. And then finally, let's look at the rest of this unit. Let's look at point 4 here. Point 4, and this kind of sums up everything. The indicative or present tense and the subjunctive moods each have their own core meaning. The indicative or simple present tense means what? Expresses what is thought to be true. There's no doubt. So like, ellos saben que estudiamos todas las noches. They know that we study every evening. I use the regular present or indicative tense. The subjunctive, on the other hand, expresses what someone wants to be true, but isn't. Quiero que estudiemos esta noche. So I want us to study this night. So I'm going to use estudiemos. Again, querer always triggers the subjunctive. And then what if there's doubt? We're going to use the subjunctive. No es cierto que estudiemos todas las noches. Or es posible que estudiemos. There's doubt. Okay, again, I'm just kind of repeating myself, but you're going to have a few questions where you're going to have uncertainty, use a subjunctive in the second clause, or you're going to have no uncertainty, just continue with the indicative or simple present tense. And let's take a quick look at these examples. Here you use the indicativo or simple present tense. Here you're going to use the subjunctive. Let's take a look. To indicate a fact, something thought to be true. Yo sé que las tortugas están bien. I know that the turtles are fine. I know it. Yo sé. No uncertainty. Here, quiero que las tortugas estén bien. Now, I want them to be fine. So I use the subjunctive. Pienso, very clear, no doubt. So I'm going to use the indicative or simple present. Pienso que ahorras agua. I believe that I think you save water. Now we're going to recommend something. Te recomiendo que ahorres agua. Now I'm recommending that I want you to do it. Recomendar, querer, even if you counsel or you advise someone to do something, you're going to use the subjunctive. Okay. Okay. Here's one with por qué, because te voy a invitar a la playa porque eres mi amigo. I'm going to invite you to the beach porque eres. With por qué, because you just use the simple present tense or indicative. But what about para qué? It's something you desire, you want, or in order that. It's going to trigger the subjunctive. So always, te voy a invitar a la playa para que seas mi amigo. All right, again, take a look at these. When there's doubt, yo no creo que los bosques estén. Es posible que ese pájaro sea. En caso de que veas, always use subjunctive after en caso de que. And I really think that sums it up. So make sure you're familiar with these uses of the subjunctive. They're going to be on your exam. They're going to give you a scenario, just like in your homework, where you're going to have to choose between, do I use the indicative or present tense, or do I use the subjunctive? And so hopefully you'll remember that after para que, you always use the subjunctive, and after en caso de que, you always use the subjunctive. After porque, because you always use the indicative or present tense. When something is uncertain, you use the subjunctive. Yo no creo, yo no pienso. Always use the sub. Es improbable, es posible. You're always going to use the subjunctive because there's some degree of doubt. No es cierto, no es verdad. There's doubt, subjunctive. But again, use the simple present or the indicative if there is complete clarity. Yo creo, yo pienso. Okay. When else? Es verdad que, es cierto que, always use the present tense or indicative. And I think that does it for this unit.